I was somewhere in remote Oklahoma, and I was pretty certain I was the only person around for miles. And it was morning, and it was already so hot and humid, and I was attempting to cross this low water bridge, is what they're called, and I crashed. And luckily, I was uninjured. And when I went to lift my motorcycle up, it just slid, as did I, but my motorcycle was sliding closer and closer to the edge of this rocky drop-off, and I knew that if it fell off there, I was going to be in a real bind. So how did I end up here? We need to go back a few years. So this is me as a young 20-something, and when adventure was my middle name, and taking risks I enjoyed. Backpacking in 20 below weather, and climbing up sheer rock faces, and kayaking in wild rivers. And then I met Anne, and we fell in love and married and bought a house and had kids. And taking risky adventures like this seemed like too much of a risk. My family depended on me. So the next thing I know, I turned 60 years old, and we were empty nesters, and that's when I found out about the Trans-America Trail. This is a network of gravel roads and dirt and gravel roads across the U.S., 5,000 miles, and it's like the Appalachian Trail except for motorcycles. And so I thought, what a great thing to do for my 60th birthday. Well, this is my friend Matthew. And I went up to him and said, hey, you want to ride across the United States? And he was like, yeah. And so the two of us went on this great adventure, motorcycle adventure across the United States. I took this photo the night before the ride, and I just told my wife, Ann, that I'd promised to be as careful as I could, but we both knew that every day there was going to be a risk of real injury. And I remember laying down that night thinking, am I really up for this ride? Well, on just day two, here in western North Carolina, we had some deep water crossings. And Matthew, true to form, just went right through it, no problem. Me, on the other hand, I was so nervous, and I went slowly. But then I quickly realized you need to keep up some speed to have some momentum to plow through. Good lesson. So I had trouble initially. Every time we would hit an obstacle, there were many, and I would want to I'd get frustrated that we weren't staying on schedule and putting in the miles. And Matthew, always patient, would say to me, hey Tom, we're on vacation, and this is an opportunity for us to enjoy the ride. Well, Matthew made a planned departure after finishing the Arkansas leg of our trip, and he went off to Boulder, Colorado, temporarily to celebrate a friend's wedding, and I rode solo through Oklahoma and New Mexico. One day, riding through Oklahoma, I stopped to take a selfie with this giant wind turbine, and as soon as I stopped and held my camera out, this huge pack of coyotes started howling. It sounded like they were coming after me, and I knew that logically that wasn't the case, but I was a little fearful. So Matthew and I met back up in southern Colorado and started riding through the mountains of Colorado, and the views were amazing, but getting to the views I found challenging. The tight switchbacks, the snow, the loose gravel, and I remember on one of these tight switchbacks going up a pass, I was trying to navigate, I fell over, and I went to lift up my bike. Well, we were over 10,000 feet, and the thin air, it just sapped my energy, and I was frustrated because I remember being a young man, and I just power through stuff like this, but to pick the bike up here, I had to calm down and make a plan. So after Colorado, we rode through Utah, and riding through Utah for me was like what it must be like to ride on the surface of Mars. It was just desolate and hot, and the sand was just, there was deep, and riding these heavy motorcycles packed down was challenging. And a lot of the time, Matthew and I were not even in sight of each other because he rode faster than I did. But here, with temperatures well over 100 degrees, we committed to staying close to each other. So in case something happened, we would set up a tarp and address whatever needed to happen. So this is a screenshot from my GoPro video camera that was attached to my helmet. And speaking of helmets, a lot of people who do these long rides have helmet-to-helmet communicators. And Matthew and I decided not to use that because we wanted to be in the moment and try to get to that Zen place that you can get to on these long rides. Speaking of long rides, we would try to get to our campsite by 5 p.m. because if we got there early enough, that frankly meant that I could go to bed early enough. And I remember in my youth, I could do something like this all day long and still have some in the tank, but that was no longer the case. Here we are in Port Orford, Oregon, and at the end of the Trans-America Trail. 4 weeks of riding, 4 weeks of camping. And when I started putting my slide deck together for this presentation, I realized that what had happened was I just kind of made a travel log, like here we are crossing a stream and here we are going over a mountain. And the organizers of this event said, hey, Tom, we encourage you to dig a little bit deeper, but I got to tell you, digging deeper was hard for me because even 3 years later, I'm still unpacking this trip, still trying to make sense of it. And but this I can tell you. 3 years ago, I set out to have a grand adventure, and that's exactly what I got. I left home, left the comforts of home, and headed out into the unknown with a friend of mine. And I wasn't even sure if I was going to be able to complete the journey. And this reminds me of one of my favorite lessons, sayings, and that is, a ship in the harbor is safe, but that's not what ships are for. Thank you.